You need to move from that seat immediately, sir! Get up now!
Have you ever watched a man get treated like he did not belong in the very seat he paid for, while the people around him stayed silent and pretended not to see it? That was exactly how it began for Nathan Whitmore on a Wednesday afternoon at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. At first glance, Nathan did not look like the kind of man who could make an airline nervous. He was 49 years old, tall but not imposing, dressed in a navy blazer over a plain grey t-shirt, dark jeans, and polished brown loafers. No gold watch flashed on his wrist. No assistant followed behind him with a tablet. No security team cleared a path through the terminal. He carried one black rolling suitcase, one leather briefcase, and the quiet exhaustion of a man who had spent the last week closing a deal that would change the future of his company. Travelers moved around him in waves. Families argued softly near the departure screens. A little boy dragged a stuffed dinosaur across the floor. Somewhere nearby, a coffee machine hissed. Overhead, a calm female voice announced a gate change for a flight to Denver. Nathan stood still in the middle of it all. Not lost, not rushed, just watching. He had learned to watch people before they watched him. It was a habit built over decades, in hotel lobbies, conference rooms, private clubs, airport lounges, places where men like him were often noticed, but not always recognized. Sometimes people saw the suit before they saw the man. Sometimes they saw the man before they respected the suit. Nathan knew both feelings too well. His phone buzzed in his hand, a message from Daniel Harper, his chief operating officer. Phoenix contract signed, final documents uploaded. Congratulations, boss. Nathan looked at the screen for a moment. His expression barely changed, but something in his shoulders softened. That contract had taken 14 months. 14 months of negotiations, delayed calls, legal revisions, late nights, quiet pressure. It was the biggest expansion deal Whitmore Systems had ever signed, and almost no one in that airport knew his name. To them, he was just another middle-aged black man in a blazer, waiting for a flight home. That was fine with Nathan. He preferred quiet power. He had built Whitmore Systems from a rented office with second-hand desks into one of the most trusted software firms in the country. His platforms helped corporations manage logistics, staffing, maintenance, and internal operations. One of his largest clients was Blue Ridge Airways, the same airline he was about to board. Their scheduling systems, their crew management tools, their maintenance tracking. All of it depended on software his company had designed. But Nathan did not think about that as he stood near Gate C-17. He thought about San Diego, his own bed, a glass of bourbon, maybe a quiet dinner if he landed early enough. Then boarding began. First-class passengers were invited to line up. Nathan slipped his phone into his pocket and reached for the handle of his suitcase. He moved without hurry, joining the short line near the gate. A woman in a cream-colored coat glanced at him, then at the first-class sign, then quickly away. Nathan noticed. He always noticed, but he said nothing. The gate agent scanned his boarding pass and smiled with the tired politeness of someone who had done the same motion 400 times that day. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Whitmore." "Seat 1A." "Thank you," Nathan said. His voice was low, warm, controlled. He stepped into the jet bridge. The sound changed immediately. The terminal noise faded behind him, replaced by the hollow echo of wheels rolling over metal flooring. The air smelled faintly of fuel and rain. Through the narrow windows, the aircraft waited under a flat, grey Texas sky, its white body streaked with the shine of recent cleaning. Nathan walked forward, calm, unaware that the seat printed on his boarding pass was about to become the center of something much larger than one passenger's comfort. Inside the aircraft, the first-class cabin was cool and polished. Soft lights glowed above wide leather seats. A flight attendant stood near the entrance, smiling at passengers with practiced precision. "Welcome aboard." Nathan nodded and turned left. Seat 1A waited by the window, his favorite seat. Not because it made him feel important. Not because he needed anyone to see him there. It was simply familiar. A small point of order in a life built around chaos, pressure, and decisions other people never saw. He placed his suitcase in the overhead bin, slid his briefcase neatly under the seat, and sat down. For the first time all day, he exhaled. Across the aisle, an older woman with silver hair adjusted her scarf and gave him a polite nod. Nathan returned it. A few rows back, a younger man stepped into the cabin. Tall, sandy-haired, expensive sunglasses resting on top of his head, pale blue shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to look casual, but not accidental. He did not look at the seat numbers. He looked at people. Then he looked at Nathan. His jaw tightened for half a second. Only half a second. But Nathan saw it. The man stopped near the front galley and whispered something to a flight attendant. She listened, glanced toward seat 1A, and her smile stiffened. Nathan's hand rested on the armrest. His breathing slowed. He did not know the man's name yet. He did not know what he wanted. But he knew that look. It was the look of someone who believed the world should rearrange itself before he ever had to ask twice. The flight attendant who had been speaking with the young man turned toward Nathan with the kind of smile people use when they already know they are about to ask for something unfair. Her name tag read Emily Parker. She was in her mid-30s, neat brown hair pinned into a tight bun, lipstick perfect, uniform pressed so sharply it almost looked new. She moved with a small hesitation, but not enough to stop herself. "Mr. Whitmore," she said. Nathan looked up. "Yes." Emily glanced over her shoulder at the sandy-haired man near the galley. He stood with one hand in his pocket, the other resting on the handle of a sleek, black carry-on. He was not nervous. He was waiting. Emily lowered her voice. "We're going to need you to switch seats for a moment." Nathan blinked once. "For a moment?" "There has been a seating mix-up," she said. "Another passenger was assigned this seat. The cabin around them kept moving, but something changed. A bag clicked into an overhead bin. A man coughed. Someone stopped turning the pages of a magazine. Nathan reached into the side pocket and pulled out his boarding pass. "This is my seat," he said. 1A. Emily looked at the pass, but only for a second. Too quick. Not enough to verify anything, just enough to pretend. "I understand, sir, but this gentleman was expecting this seat today. He is one of our most frequent VIP flyers." Nathan turned his head slowly toward the young man. The man gave him a small smile. Not friendly, not apologetic, more like a person watching a valet bring the wrong car. Nathan looked back at Emily. "What is his assigned seat?" Emily's fingers tightened around her tablet. "It appears he is in 3C. "Then 3C is his seat," Nathan said. The words were quiet, but they landed cleanly. Across the aisle, the older woman with silver hair paused, with her scarf still in her hands. She looked at Emily, then at Nathan, and her face changed. Not shock, recognition. The tired recognition of someone who had lived long enough to know when politeness was being used as a cover. Emily swallowed. 3C is still first class, Mr. Whitmore. Same service, same cabin. We would really appreciate your flexibility." Flexibility? Nathan had heard that word many times. in offices where people wanted him to accept less equity, in boardrooms where clients delayed payment but expected immediate delivery, in private dinners where someone called him impressive, then asked who had really built his company. Flexibility often meant one person giving up dignity so another person could stay comfortable. Nathan placed the boarding pass on his lap. I booked this seat weeks ago. I understand. I paid for this seat. Yes, sir. I boarded when I was called. I sat where my ticket says I should sit. Emily's smile tightened. No one is disputing that. Then why are we having this conversation? A silence opened between them. It was not loud. It did not need to be. The sandy-haired man stepped forward then, as if he had waited long enough for the staff to handle what he considered a simple inconvenience. Look, man, he said, I fly this route all the time. 1A is kind of my spot. Nathan studied him. The man was maybe 31, maybe 32. Expensive shirt, expensive haircut, the easy confidence of someone who had rarely been told no in public. Your spot, Nathan said. Yeah, Tyler Prescott, Platinum Executive Tier. I am sure they can take care of you somewhere else. He said it casually. That made it worse. Nathan did not move. Tyler's smile thinned. It is nothing personal. Nathan's eyes stayed steady. It becomes personal when you ask a stranger to give up what he paid for, because you prefer it? A few heads turned. Emily's face flushed. Gentlemen, please, we are just trying to get everyone settled. Then settle him in 3C, Nathan said. The older woman across the aisle finally spoke. That seems reasonable to me. Emily turned toward her, startled. Ma'am, we have the situation under control. No, the woman said, her voice firm but not cruel. You are asking the wrong man to move. Tyler exhaled through his nose and looked away, irritated now. His fingers tapped against his suitcase handle. Tap, tap, tap. Each sound small, sharp, impatient. Emily bent closer to Nathan, lowering her voice. Mr. Whitmore, I do not want this to become an issue. Nathan looked at her for a long second. It already is. Her expression flickered. For the first time, she seemed to understand that the man in 1A was not embarrassed. He was not confused. He was not going to shrink just because the cabin had begun to watch. Nathan leaned back, calm as stone. I am not moving. Emily's lips parted. No words came out at first. Behind her, Tyler's face hardened. The boarding line slowed behind the curtain. A child's laugh from economy faded quickly. The cabin lights hummed softly overhead. Emily straightened. All right, Mr. Whitmore, she said, clipped and cold now. We will see what we can do. She turned away, heels tapping toward the galley. Tyler stayed where he was for one extra second, staring at Nathan as if trying to place him, as if wondering why this man had not reacted the way he was supposed to. Nathan did not give him anything. No anger, no apology, no fear, just silence. And sometimes silence, when carried by a man who knows his own worth, can be louder than shouting. Emily did not go far. Nathan watched her stop behind the front galley curtain, where she leaned close to a taller crew member with broad shoulders and a hard jaw. The man listened without looking at Nathan at first. Then his eyes shifted toward seat 1A. There it was again. That quick measurement. The kind of look that took in Nathan's blazer, his plain shirt, his calm face, and somehow decided the problem must be him. The taller man adjusted his tie and stepped into the aisle. His name tag read, Ryan Brooks. He moved like someone who believed a uniform could turn an opinion into a rule. Mr. Whitmore, Ryan said. Nathan looked up. Yes. Ryan placed one hand on the top of the seat in front of him and lowered his voice just enough to sound professional. but not enough to keep the nearby passengers from hearing. I understand there has been some confusion regarding Seat 1A. There is no confusion, Nathan said. My boarding pass says 1A. Ryan smiled without warmth. I hear you, but we have a priority passenger who was expecting this seat, and we need to resolve this before we can close the cabin door. Nathan glanced at Tyler Prescott. Tyler stood near the galley now with his arms crossed, his jaw tight, his sunglasses still resting on his head. He was no longer smiling. He looked annoyed, like a man whose reservation at a steakhouse had been delayed by someone he considered invisible. Nathan turned back to Ryan. Is there a safety issue with my sitting here? Ryan paused. No, sir. Is there a federal regulation that requires me to move? Another pause. No, sir. But crew members do have discretion over seating when operational needs require it. Operational needs, Nathan repeated. His voice remained low, but the cabin felt smaller around it. An older businessman in the second row lowered his tablet. Margaret Ellis, across the aisle, stopped pretending not to listen. Even the passenger behind Tyler leaned slightly into the aisle. Nathan continued. What is the operational need? Ryan's jaw shifted. We are trying to accommodate a valued customer. Nathan nodded once. Then say that. Ryan blinked. Excuse me? Say you are asking me to move from a seat I paid for because you value him more. The words cut clean through the soft hum of the cabin. Emily looked down at her tablet. Tyler's eyes narrowed. Somewhere behind them, a suitcase wheel squeaked and stopped. Ryan straightened. Sir, there is no need to characterize it that way. But that is what it is, Nathan said. Margaret spoke again, her voice steady. He is right. Ryan turned to her. Ma'am, please allow us to handle this. I am allowing you, she said. I am also watching you, a few passengers murmured. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to let Ryan know the room had shifted. Tyler stepped forward then. Come on, he said, with a sharp little laugh. This is getting ridiculous. It is one seat. Nathan looked at him. Then sit in yours. The sentence landed hard. Tyler's face flushed. You do not know who I am, he said. Nathan almost smiled, but did not. That may be true, he said, but I know where you are assigned to sit. A man in row 2 let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, then caught himself. His wife touched his arm, warning him not to get involved, but her eyes stayed fixed on Ryan. Ryan's tone hardened. Mister Whitmore, if you refuse to cooperate, this may delay the flight. Nathan heard it for what it was. Not information. Pressure. The old kind. The familiar kind. Make the person being mistreated feel responsible for the inconvenience caused by those mistreating him. Turn the room against him. Make his dignity look like selfishness. He had seen that strategy before, in conference rooms where calm objections were called hostility, in contract negotiations where fairness was called difficulty, in places where people wanted obedience, then dressed it up as courtesy. Nathan folded his hands in his lap. If the flight is delayed because you are trying to remove me from my confirmed seat for another passenger's preference, that will not be my decision. Ryan's nostrils flared. Sir, I strongly recommend you reconsider. Nathan's eyes did not move. I strongly recommend you check your policy. The silence after that was heavier than the first. Emily's cheeks were red now. She shifted from one foot to the other, clearly wishing this had gone differently. Ryan looked toward the cockpit, then back to Nathan. Tyler pulled out his phone and began typing fast with both thumbs, his irritation now open and childish. Margaret leaned slightly toward Nathan. You are doing fine, she said softly. Nathan turned his head just enough to acknowledge her. Thank you. Those two words carried more weight than anyone else understood, because Nathan did not need saving. But every person deserves a witness, and sometimes one honest voice in a room full of hesitation can keep a wrong thing from becoming normal. Ryan stepped away, taking Emily with him. Their voices dropped behind the curtain. Tyler followed them, whispering something Nathan could not hear. But Nathan saw his face, saw the entitlement curdle into anger, saw Emily's nervous glance back toward him, saw Ryan pick up the service phone. The cabin door was still open. Boarding had slowed. The air had changed from polished comfort to tight expectation. Nathan looked out the window at the grey runway and the service trucks moving like small machines under the wing. His face remained calm, but inside, something old had been touched. Not rage, not fear, a deep, cold disappointment, the kind that comes when people remind you that respect is often conditional, offered freely to some, and demanded as proof from others. Then the galley curtain moved again. Ryan returned. This time he was not alone. A man in a dark airport blazer stepped onto the plane behind him, wearing a polished badge and a smile that did not reach his eyes. The conversation was no longer about a seat. Nathan knew that before the man said a word. The man in the airport blazer stepped into first class like he had already decided how the story would end. His badge read, Calvin Reed. He was in his mid-40s, clean-shaven, with silver at his temples and a face trained to stay calm under pressure. But his eyes betrayed him. They moved quickly. Nathan, Emily, Ryan, Tyler, then back to Nathan. Not once did he ask for the boarding pass first. That told Nathan enough. "Mr. Whitmore," Calvin said, stopping beside seat 1A. Nathan looked up. "That is correct." Calvin gave a practiced smile. "My name is Calvin Reed. I am the ground operations supervisor for this flight. We are trying to resolve a seating issue before departure." Nathan rested one hand on his briefcase. "There is no seating issue from my side." Calvin nodded slowly, as if humoring a difficult child. "I understand your position. Do you?" A few passengers looked up again. Calvin's smile held, but only barely. "Sir, we have an elite member who travels with us frequently. There seems to have been a service expectation attached to this seat. To avoid further disruption, we are asking you one final time to move to another seat in first class." Nathan stared at him. One final time. The phrase hung there. It carried a threat without admitting it was a threat. Tyler stood behind Calvin, just far enough away to avoid responsibility, but close enough to enjoy the pressure. His phone was now in his hand, screen dark, fingers curled around it. Emily stood behind Ryan, lips pressed tight. She looked less sure than before, but uncertainty had not made her braver. Nathan picked up his boarding pass and held it out. Calvin glanced at it this time. Only glanced. "Seat 1A, Nathan said. "Confirmed. Paid." Scanned at the gate. "Yes, sir," Calvin said. "Nobody is saying you do not have a valid boarding pass. Then why are you asking me to move?" "Because we are asking for cooperation." Nathan's eyes sharpened. Cooperation is voluntary. This does not feel voluntary. The first-class cabin went still. The hum of the air vents seemed louder. A baby cried somewhere far back in economy, then quieted. Someone near row 3 whispered, "Oh my goodness," under her breath. Calvin leaned in slightly. "Mr. Whitmore, refusing crew and ground staff instructions can create complications. We do not want this to escalate." Nathan did not blink. What exactly would escalation look like? Calvin paused. "If necessary, we may have to ask you to step off the aircraft so this can be discussed at the gate." There it was. Soft words, hard meaning, removal, public humiliation, a grown man being walked off a plane for refusing to surrender the seat he bought. Margaret Ellis sat forward sharply. "That is outrageous." Calvin turned toward her. "Ma'am, please stay seated." "I am seated," she said, "and I am listening." Her voice was not loud. It did not shake. That made it stronger. A man in row 2 raised his hand halfway, like he was in a town meeting instead of an airplane. "I saw his boarding pass," he said. "The gentleman is right. Why not put the other passenger in his assigned seat?" Tyler snapped his head toward him. "This does not concern you." The man's wife looked frightened, but he did not take it back. "It concerns everybody if the airline can just move people around, because someone complains loud enough." Calvin's jaw tightened. "Sir, please do not interfere." Nathan felt the cabin shifting again. Not completely. Some passengers avoided eye contact. Some wanted the plane to leave. Some were annoyed by the delay and did not care who was right. That was human nature. Discomfort often asks justice to hurry up. But some people were watching clearly now. They saw it. They knew. Calvin turned back to Nathan. "Mr. Whitmore, will you move to 3C?" No. The answer was immediate. Calvin inhaled. "Sir, I need you to think carefully." "I have. This is your final opportunity to resolve this peacefully." Nathan's voice dropped lower. Peacefully does not mean quietly accepting something wrong. The words struck the cabin like a gavel. Emily looked down. Ryan shifted his weight. Tyler muttered something under his breath, but Nathan heard enough. Unbelievable. Nathan turned toward him. "What is unbelievable, Mr. Prescott?" Tyler froze for half a second. He had not expected his name to be used. "That you are making all this drama over a seat," he said. Nathan nodded. "A seat you are also making drama over." Tyler's face reddened. "I fly this airline every week." Nathan leaned forward slightly. "Then you should know how seat assignments work." The man in row 2 let out another quiet breath. Margaret's mouth tightened, almost a smile, but her eyes stayed sad. She had seen too many moments like this to enjoy the sharpness of the reply. Calvin's professional mask slipped. "Mr. Whitmore, I am going to ask you to come with me to the gate." "No." Short, controlled. Final. Ryan stepped closer. "Sir." Nathan raised one hand, not aggressively, just enough to stop the performance. "I am not threatening anyone. I am not delaying this aircraft. I am not refusing a safety instruction. I am sitting in the seat printed on my boarding pass. If you remove me for that, make sure the paperwork says exactly that." The cabin went silent. Not quiet. Silent. Because the truth, once spoken clearly, leaves people with fewer places to hide. Calvin looked around and saw the phones now. 3 of them. Maybe 4. A woman near the aisle had one angled from her lap. The man in row 2 held his openly now, not recording dramatically, just preserving the moment. For the first time, Calvin seemed to calculate consequences. Not fairness. Consequences. That difference hurt more than Nathan expected. Calvin straightened his jacket. "Very well," he said, his voice clipped. "Stay in your seat. We will make alternate arrangements." Tyler's head snapped toward him. "Are you serious?" Calvin did not answer him. Ryan stepped back. Emily moved aside. The small wall of uniforms broke apart. Nathan remained seated. He had won the seat. But no one in that cabin mistook it for peace. As Calvin walked back toward the galley, Nathan looked out the window. The sky had darkened slightly. Rain dotted the glass in tiny silver beads. His reflection stared back at him. Calm face. Tired eyes. A man who knew that dignity often cost more than the ticket. And somewhere deep inside him, behind the stillness, a decision began to form. The cabin door closed with a heavy click. But the sound did not bring relief. It sounded final, like a judge ending arguments before the truth had been fully heard. Nathan kept his eyes on the rain-streaked window as the aircraft pushed back from the gate. Outside, baggage carts rolled across the wet pavement. A ramp worker in a neon vest raised one arm, then disappeared beneath the wing. Inside first class, the mood had changed. No one spoke loudly now. Magazine pages turned slower. Seatbelts clicked with careful hands. Even the champagne glasses seemed to make less noise when they touched the trays. Tyler Prescott had been placed in 3C. He did not hide his anger well. He dropped into the seat with a stiff motion, shoved his carry-on under the seat in front of him, and muttered to the man beside him, "Unbelievable! All that over one seat." The man beside him gave a weak smile, the kind people give when they do not want trouble near them. But he said nothing. Nathan heard it. He did not turn around. That was one of the hardest parts of moments like this. The insult did not end when the confrontation ended. It lingered. It sat in the air. It slipped into the body and stayed there, quiet and heavy. Emily came through the aisle with pre-flight drinks. Her hands were steady, but her face had lost its earlier polish. She stopped at Nathan's row and held out a glass of water. "Water, Mr. Whitmore?" Nathan looked up at her. "No bourbon today." The question was simple, not sarcastic, not loud, but Emily's throat moved as she swallowed. "I am sorry, sir. We will begin full service after takeoff." Nathan studied her face for a brief second. He saw the embarrassment now. Not enough to undo what had happened, but enough to show she knew the situation had crossed a line. "Water is fine," he said. She set it down carefully. "Thank you." Across the aisle, Margaret Ellis watched Emily walk away. Then she turned to Nathan. "I am sorry you had to go through that." Nathan's fingers rested around the glass. "You did not cause it." "No," she said softly. "But I have seen too many people stay quiet when they should not." Nathan looked at her then. Her silver hair was neatly brushed. Her hands were thin, with blue veins rising under the skin. A wedding ring sat loose on one finger. She had the tired kindness of someone who had buried people, forgiven people, and still believed decency mattered. "My husband was a school principal for 34 years, she said. "He used to tell our students that rules only mean something when they protect the person with the least power in the room." Nathan absorbed that. It landed somewhere deeper than the argument had. "That is a good lesson," he said. Margaret gave a small nod. It cost him sometimes. The plane paused at the end of the taxiway. Engines deepened. The cabin trembled. The lights dimmed. Nathan leaned back. He had spent his life learning control. Control his voice. Control his face. Control the anger that other people were allowed to show freely. He knew the burden of being calm, when calm was not what he felt. The engines roared. The aircraft surged forward. Rain streaked across the window in silver lines. The runway lights blurred. The cabin pressed back into the seats. For a moment, everyone was silent in the shared vulnerability of takeoff. Then the plane lifted. Dallas fell away beneath them. Nathan closed his eyes. He should have felt victory. He did not. All he could think about was how quickly a confirmed seat had become negotiable once the right person wanted it. How smoothly polite language had dressed up unfairness. How easily authority had shifted from service to pressure, and how many other passengers had moved because they didn't have the strength, confidence, or resources to refuse. That thought stayed with him. Not himself. Others. The widow traveling alone. The young veteran who hated confrontation. The grandmother who saved for one first-class ticket to visit her grandchildren. The immigrant father whose English might fail under pressure. The person who would give up their seat, then spend the whole flight wondering why they had felt so small. Nathan opened his eyes. His reflection in the darkened window looked older than it had at the gate. In the galley, Emily whispered with Ryan. Ryan shook his head once. Emily looked toward Nathan, then quickly away. Tyler ordered a drink the moment service began. "Make it strong," he said. The words carried forward. Nathan heard the ice hit the glass, heard the liquid pour, heard Tyler exhale as if he had been the one wronged. The injustice of that almost made Nathan laugh. Almost. Instead, he opened his briefcase and removed a slim folder. Inside were printed notes from the Phoenix deal, final points, signature copies, projections. He stared at them without reading. At the bottom of the folder was a small tab marked Blue Ridge Airways, the airline's name, their software renewal, their service agreement, their dependency. Nathan's thumb rested on the tab. He did not pull it open yet. He only looked at it. A decision was not revenge when it came from clarity. And clarity was arriving now, cold and precise. By the time the seatbelt sign turned off, Nathan had stopped thinking like a passenger. He was thinking like the man Blue Ridge Airways did not realize they had just humiliated. Not in anger, in record, in policy, in consequence. The rest of the flight passed in a silence that did not feel peaceful. Nathan worked for a while, or at least he made the motions of working. He opened the Phoenix file. He reviewed the first page, then the second. Then he realized he had read the same paragraph 3 times and remembered none of it. His mind kept returning to the same narrow aisle. Emily's tight smile, Ryan's polished warning, Calvin's soft threat. Tyler's voice behind him. "You do not know who I am." Nathan looked down at the folder in his lap. No, he thought. They did not know who he was. But that was not the real problem. The real problem was that they thought they knew enough. That was how unfairness often worked. It did not always arrive shouting. Sometimes it arrived wearing a name tag. Sometimes it spoke in customer service language. Sometimes it asked for cooperation while quietly taking something away. A bell chimed overhead. Emily passed through the cabin collecting glasses. She paused at Nathan's row, her hat hovering over his untouched water. "Would you like anything else, Mr. Whitmore?" Her voice was softer now. Nathan looked at her. Not harshly. Not kindly, either. "No, thank you." She nodded, but did not leave right away. For a second, she looked as if she might say something more. Maybe an apology. Maybe an explanation. Maybe the truth. Instead, she picked up the glass and moved on. Fear had a sound, too. It was the sound of words swallowed before they could become courage. Across the aisle, Margaret watched Emily disappear toward the galley. She wanted to say something. Nathan could see it in the way her fingers pressed against the armrest. But she seemed to understand that not every wound wanted company right away. So she let him have the quiet. That small mercy mattered. The plane cut westward through a wall of late afternoon clouds. The light outside shifted from grey to pale gold, then to a deeper amber. Below, somewhere unseen, deserts and highways stretched toward California. In row 3, Tyler had recovered enough to sound offended again. "I have never been treated like that on this airline," he told Ryan when the attendant passed. "I expect someone to follow up." "Of course, Mr. Prescott," Ryan said. "We apologize for the inconvenience." Nathan heard every word. Inconvenience. That was what Tyler received, an apology for inconvenience. Nathan had received a threat of removal. The difference was not accidental. It rarely was. Nathan closed the folder and slid it back into his briefcase. Then he took out a small notebook. He always carried one, not for appearances, for memory, for facts, for the details people later tried to blur. He wrote down the time. Gate C-17, flight from Dallas-Fort Worth to San Diego, seat 1A, names he had seen, Emily Parker, Ryan Brooks, Calvin Reed, Tyler Prescott. He wrote the phrases too. We need you to switch seats, frequent VIP flyer, operational needs, final opportunity. Step off the aircraft. His handwriting was clean, measured, almost surgical. Each word made the event less emotional and more real. Documentation had saved him more than once. It had saved contracts. It had saved employees. It had saved truth from being rewritten by people with louder voices. When the plane began its descent into San Diego, the cabin lights dimmed again. Passengers lifted window shades. Seatbacks clicked upright. The air changed, that familiar mixture of movement and impatience as everyone prepared to return to their own lives. Nathan looked behind him once. Tyler avoided his eyes. That was almost funny. Men like Tyler were boldest when systems stood between them and accountability. Without the wall of uniforms, he looked smaller. Emily made the final announcement with a steady voice. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into San Diego. Please fasten your seatbelts and make sure your tray tables are stowed. Her words were routine. But Nathan heard the strain underneath. As the aircraft dropped through the clouds, the city appeared below them. San Diego's lights blinked awake near the water, soft and scattered beneath a violet evening sky. The landing was smooth. Too smooth for the roughness Nathan carried off the plane. When the aircraft reached the gate, everyone stood at once. Overhead, bins opened. Phones came alive. The aisle filled with bodies and bags, and the restless sound of people eager to leave. Nathan waited. He was in no hurry. Margaret stood across from him, one hand on the seat for balance. "Mr. Whitmore," she said. Nathan turned. "You did the right thing," she said. Her voice was quiet enough that only he heard it. Nathan gave her a small nod. "So did you." Her eyes softened. "I wish more people had." That sentence followed him all the way up the jet bridge. It followed him through the terminal, past the bright signs and polished floors, past travelers greeting loved ones, past drivers holding name cards near baggage claim. Outside, the evening air was cool and smelled faintly of salt. His driver, Charles, stood beside a black sedan. Charles was 58, broad-shouldered, with a calm face and a warm smile. He opened the rear door as Nathan approached. "Good to see you, Mr. Whitmore. How was the flight?" Nathan paused. For a moment, the honest answer rose in his throat. Then he looked back at the terminal glass, where the reflection of Blue Ridge Airways signage glowed behind him. "We landed," Nathan said. Charles heard what was not said. His smile faded just slightly. "Yes, sir." On the ride home, Nathan did not answer emails. He did not take calls. He watched the city move by in streaks of white headlights and red tail lights. By the time the sedan turned toward the coast, his phone was already in his hand. He called Daniel Harper. Daniel answered on the second ring. "Nathan? Everything all right?" Nathan looked out at the dark water beyond the highway. "Pull every active agreement we have with Blue Ridge Airways," he said. Daniel went silent. Then, carefully, he asked, "All of them?" "All of them," Nathan said. "Service terms, renewal dates, support obligations, priority clauses, everything." Daniel's voice changed. "What happened?" Nathan leaned back against the leather seat. "I will explain in the morning." A beat. Then Nathan added, "And Daniel?" "Yes?" "No one contacts Blue Ridge tonight." "Understood." Nathan ended the call and stared at the phone in his palm. The flight was over. But the consequence, had just begun. Nathan did not sleep much that night. He stood in his kitchen long after midnight, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his forearms, a glass of water untouched on the counter. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes old memories louder. Outside the windows, San Diego rested under a dark blue sky. A few lights glowed along the street. Somewhere far off, a car passed, then disappeared. Nathan kept seeing the aisle. Not because he was afraid, because he understood what had almost happened. If he had been tired enough, he might have moved. If Margaret had not spoken, the cabin might have stayed silent. If Calvin had pushed a little harder, Nathan might have been walked off that aircraft in front of everyone, labeled difficult for refusing to be erased. He had built a company with hundreds of employees. He had signed contracts worth more than most people saw in a lifetime. But in that cabin, none of that had mattered. Not to them. That was the wound, not the seat. The assumption. His phone lit up on the counter. A message from Daniel Harper. Contracts pulled. Service maps included. I will be in the office by 6:30. Nathan looked at the message, then set the phone down. He did not smile. By sunrise, he was already dressed. The Whitmore Systems headquarters stood in downtown San Diego, a glass front building that caught the morning light like a blade. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee and floor polish. A security guard named Luis looked up from the desk and straightened. Morning, Mr. Whitmore. Morning, Luis. Everything okay, sir? Nathan paused just long enough for Luis to notice. We are going to make some decisions today. Luis nodded, not understanding, but feeling the weight of it. Yes, sir. Upstairs, the executive conference room was already lit. Daniel Harper stood at the far end of the table, laptop open, papers arranged in neat stacks. He was 45, sharp-eyed, careful, and loyal in the way that did not need many words. He had worked with Nathan for 11 years, long enough to know when his boss was angry, and long enough to know that Nathan's anger never moved fast. That was what made it dangerous. Coffee? Daniel asked. No. Daniel nodded and tapped the first folder. Blue Ridge Airways. Current Master Services Agreement. Active through the end of the year. Renewal discussions scheduled for August. We provide crew scheduling, maintenance logs, workforce allocation, delay analytics, and the executive reporting dashboard. Nathan sat at the head of the table. What support level? Contracted standard plus discretionary priority. Nathan looked up. Discretionary. Daniel exhaled. Yes. Meaning we have been giving them faster turnaround than the contract actually requires. How much faster? For critical tickets, usually under 2 hours. Contract allows up to 1 business day, unless it is a system outage. Nathan turned a page, and they pay for standard support. Correct. The room fell still. Daniel watched Nathan's face. No shouting, no clenched fist, just that quiet focus that made people sit straighter. Who else wants this package? Nathan asked. Daniel hesitated. 3 carriers have been circling us. Pacific Union, North Star Air, Mesa Continental. 2 are direct competitors. Nathan closed the folder. Start the conversations. Daniel's eyebrows lifted. Today? This morning. Daniel sat down slowly. Nathan, before we do that, I need to ask, is this about what happened on the flight? Nathan leaned back. It is about what the flight revealed. Daniel waited. Nathan's voice stayed even. They had every document they needed. They had my ticket. They had the scan from the gate. They had the seat assignment. Still, they looked for a way to move me, because someone they valued more wanted what I had. Daniel's face hardened. Who was involved? Emily Parker, Ryan Brooks, Calvin Reed, Tyler Prescott. Daniel typed the names into a note without speaking. Nathan continued. We are not breaking the contract. We are not retaliating illegally. We are not being reckless. We will meet every obligation we signed. Nothing less. Daniel nodded. And nothing more, nothing more. The words were quiet, final. Nathan slid the contract across the table. No priority handling beyond written terms. No courtesy escalations. No executive shortcuts. No weekend favors unless billed. No early access to updates unless their agreement covers it. Daniel looked at him for a long moment. That will hurt them. Nathan's eyes did not move. It will tell them the difference between service they earned and service they assumed. That landed hard. Because it was not only about Blue Ridge, it was about every room where people confuse privilege with rights, every counter where respect is measured by appearance, every system that teaches employees to serve power before fairness. Daniel picked up his phone, then stopped. Do you want me to notify them? No. Nathan's answer came before the question finished. Let the contract speak first. Daniel lowered the phone. Understood. A few minutes later, the senior leadership team began to arrive. One by one, they entered with tablets, coffee cups, and questions they did not ask yet. They sensed the shift immediately. Nathan stood at the head of the table. This morning, we are reviewing client priority allocation, he said, starting with Blue Ridge Airways. The room sharpened. He did not mention the flight. Not at first. He spoke about standards, boundaries, written obligations, the danger of rewarding clients who undervalue the people behind the service. He reminded them that dignity had to be part of company culture, not just a word in a handbook. Then he paused. And when a partner shows us who they are, we believe them. No one moved. Daniel looked down at the Blue Ridge file. The first domino had been touched, not pushed, touched. And somewhere inside Blue Ridge Airways, nobody knew the balance had already begun to shift. By noon, the conference room had become a map of consequences. Names of clients filled the glass wall in black marker. Arrows connected support teams, renewal dates, and contract tiers. Blue Ridge Airways sat near the center, circled once, then again. Not in anger. In accuracy. Nathan stood with his sleeves rolled up, marker in hand, while his senior team studied the board. We are not punishing them, he said. No one interrupted. We are correcting an imbalance. For too long, Blue Ridge has received support they never paid for because we believed the relationship was built on trust. Daniel Harper looked at the service chart. And now? Nathan capped the marker. Now we follow the paper. The room stayed quiet. That was the kind of sentence that sounded small until everyone understood what it meant. Whitmore Systems had never been careless with Blue Ridge. Their engineers answered late-night calls. Their project managers adjusted schedules. Their analysts caught problems before Blue Ridge even knew those problems existed. It was not written in the contract. It was the extra layer that came from respect. And respect, Nathan now understood, had not been returned. At 2:15 that afternoon, Daniel placed 3 calls. The first went to Pacific Union Air, the second to North Star Air, the third to Mesa Continental. He did not sound rushed. He did not mention Blue Ridge. He simply said, Whitmore Systems might have availability for a limited number of new aviation clients in the next quarter. Every call changed tone within minutes. Pacific Union asked how soon they could schedule a technical review. North Star wanted a pricing model by Friday. Mesa Continental requested a private meeting with Nathan himself. By 4 o'clock, Daniel walked into Nathan's office holding his tablet. They are interested, he said. Nathan looked up from his desk. How interested? Pacific Union said they have been waiting 2 years for us to have capacity. Nathan leaned back. And Blue Ridge? Nothing yet. Good. Daniel hesitated. You know they will notice. Nathan looked through the glass wall toward the engineering floor, where rows of employees worked under soft white lights. Young developers, senior analysts, project leads, people who had given evenings and weekends to keep airline systems stable while passengers never knew their names. They should notice, Nathan said. 3 days later, they did. The first call came from a regional operations manager in Denver. His name was Kevin Malone, and his voice carried the thin panic of a man trying not to sound panicked. Daniel put the call on speaker in Nathan's office. We have a scheduling backlog, Kevin said. Crew pairing is slow across 3 hubs, and our maintenance dashboard is not updating as fast as usual. We opened a support ticket 40 minutes ago. Daniel checked the ticket number. Yes. I see it. Usually someone is already working on it by now, Kevin said. Daniel's voice remained calm. Your current support agreement allows response within 1 business day unless a system outage is confirmed. There was a pause. Right. But normally your team jumps on these faster. Normally, Daniel said, we have additional capacity available. Kevin breathed into the phone. Are you saying you do not have capacity? I am saying your request is in the queue according to your service level. Another pause. Longer this time. Is Nathan there? Nathan sat across from Daniel, silent. Daniel looked at him. Nathan shook his head once. Mr. Whitmore is unavailable. Kevin tried to laugh, but it came out dry. Okay. Well, can you flag it as urgent? If it qualifies under the contract, yes. And if it does not, then it will be handled in order. The call ended with polite words and a fear neither side named. By Friday, the calls were no longer regional. Blue Ridge Corporate reached out. Their operations director, Stephanie Cole, requested a meeting. Her email was careful. Too careful. She used words like alignment, partnership, and service continuity. The kind of language executives use when something is breaking, but nobody wants it written down. Nathan read it once. Then he forwarded it to Daniel. Standard reply, he said. Daniel sent it. We are fulfilling all current contractual obligations and are happy to review any additional needs during scheduled renewal discussions. That sentence hit Blue Ridge like a locked door. Inside Blue Ridge headquarters in Charlotte, the mood changed quickly. Stephanie Cole stood in a glass conference room with a phone pressed to her ear, watching delay projections crawl across a screen. I understand the contract, she said sharply. I am asking why Whitmore stopped treating us like a priority. Across the table, a vice president rubbed his forehead. Because we are not paying for priority, he muttered. Stephanie covered the phone and glared at him. That is not helpful. No, he said. But it is true. A younger analyst at the end of the table spoke carefully. There is also chatter that Pacific Union has a technical meeting with Whitmore next week. Stephanie lowered the phone. What? The analyst swallowed. And North Star Air requested integration planning. The room went cold. Because then they understood. Not fully. Not yet. But enough. Whitmore Systems was not trapped. Blue Ridge was. That afternoon, Nathan received another email. This one was marked urgent. From Stephanie Cole. Nathan read the subject line. Request for executive discussion regarding strategic partnership. He did not answer right away. Instead, he opened the notebook from the flight. Emily Parker, Ryan Brooks, Calvin Reed, Tyler Prescott. Operational needs, final opportunity, step off the aircraft. He looked at those words for a long time. Then he closed the notebook. Not because he had forgotten, because he had remembered enough. Blue Ridge Airways requested the meeting 3 times before Nathan agreed to one call. Not a dinner. Not an executive retreat. Not the kind of polished meeting where people shook hands, smiled for photographs, and pretended nothing had happened. A call. 30 minutes. No extensions. Daniel Harper sat beside Nathan in the executive conference room, laptop open, legal counsel on speaker, and the Blue Ridge file placed in the center of the table. Outside the glass wall, the office moved with its usual rhythm. Keyboards clicked, phones rang, people worked. The world didn't stop just because one company had finally discovered the cost of careless disrespect. At 9 o'clock sharp, Stephanie Cole appeared on the screen. Behind her sat 2 executives Nathan recognized from past contract reviews. One was Mark Delaney, Blue Ridge's chief operating officer. The other was a woman from procurement named Allison Grant, who had once told Nathan over lunch that Whitmore Systems was the only vendor keeping their operational backbone from cracking. No one smiled for long. "Nathan," Stephanie began, "thank you for making the time." "Mr. Whitmore," Nathan said. A brief silence followed. Stephanie adjusted her posture. "Of course. Mr. Whitmore." Daniel glanced down at his notes, but Nathan saw the corner of his mouth tighten. Not amusement. Recognition. Sometimes respect arrived late and still expected credit for showing up. Mark Delaney leaned forward. "We value the relationship between Blue Ridge and Whitmore Systems. We have been partners for several years. That history matters to us." Nathan folded his hands. "It matters to us too. That is why we were surprised by the recent shift in service responsiveness," Mark said. "Our teams have reported longer wait times, fewer escalations, and limited access to your senior engineers," Daniel answered before Nathan did. "Your teams are receiving the service level listed in the current agreement." Mark looked annoyed. "Yes, but historically there has been more flexibility." Nathan's eyes stayed steady. "There is that word again." Mark blinked. "I am sorry." "Flexibility," Nathan said. "It usually means someone is being asked to give more than what was agreed to, while the other side treats it as normal." Stephanie's face changed slightly. She understood something had just shifted beneath the table. "Mr. Whitmore," she said carefully, "if there are concerns about our partnership, we would like to understand them." Nathan let the silence breathe. He did not rush. He wanted every person on that screen to feel the weight of waiting. "Last Wednesday," he said, "I flew Blue Ridge from Dallas-Fort Worth to San Diego. Seat 1A, confirmed ticket, scanned at the gate, printed on my boarding pass." Allison Grant's eyes dropped for half a second. Stephanie went very still. Mark looked confused first. Then guarded, Nathan continued, "I was asked to move because another passenger preferred my seat. Your staff described him as a frequent VIP flyer. When I refused, a crew member escalated. Then a ground supervisor boarded and threatened to remove me from the aircraft." Nobody spoke. The room on the screen seemed to shrink. Nathan's voice remained calm, which made it sharper. At no point was there a safety issue. At no point was there a ticketing issue. At no point was there a regulation requiring me to move. There was only a preference. His preference, supported by your staff. Stephanie swallowed. "Mr. Whitmore, I was not aware of this incident." "I know." Mark recovered enough to speak. "That sounds like a serious customer service breakdown. We will investigate it immediately." Nathan looked at him. "No, Mr. Delaney, it was not just a customer service breakdown." Mark's mouth closed. "It was a judgment," Nathan said, "made in public, reinforced by authority. then covered in operational language. The word sat heavy in the room. Daniel watched Stephanie's face. She looked pale now, not because Nathan had raised his voice, but because he had not. Nathan continued, "I am the same person in seat 1A that I am in this conference room. The difference is that on the aircraft, your people thought I was easier to move." Allison whispered something off camera. Stephanie muted herself briefly, then unmuted. "Mr. Whitmore, I want to personally apologize for what happened." Nathan leaned back. "I believe you are sorry it reached this table." Stephanie flinched. That was not cruel. It was exact. "I am sorry," she said again, slower this time. "Not just for the business impact, for the way you were treated." Nathan looked at her for a moment. "That is the first correct thing anyone from Blue Ridge has said to me." The sentence landed softly, but it cut deep. Mark stared down at his hands. Stephanie nodded once. "We would like the opportunity to repair this." "Repair requires truth," Nathan said. "Not language about misunderstandings, not a quiet apology after consequences appear. Truth." Stephanie's eyes lifted. "You are right." Nathan glanced at Daniel, then back to the screen. "Whitmore Systems will honor the current agreement through its term. Beyond that, we are evaluating where our resources are respected and best used." Mark sat forward quickly. "Are you saying renewal is off the table?" Nathan's answer came without hesitation. "I am saying respect should have been on the table before renewal ever was." No one moved. For the first time, Blue Ridge had nothing polished to say. And Nathan, who had once been asked to step off their plane, ended the call without raising his voice. Daniel closed the laptop slowly. "That was colder than yelling," he said. Nathan looked toward the city beyond the glass. Yelling would have made them feel like victims. He picked up the Blue Ridge file and set it aside. The truth doesn't need volume. Then, somewhere in Charlotte, the people who had treated one man like an inconvenience began to understand that power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly in 1A and waits. 3 weeks later, the letter arrived on Nathan Whitmore's desk. It came in a thick cream envelope, hand-delivered by courier, with the Blue Ridge Airways logo pressed into the corner. Not emailed, not filtered through legal, not softened by corporate language buried in attachments. A letter. Nathan looked at it for a long moment before opening it. Daniel Harper stood near the window, arms folded, watching the traffic far below. He did not ask what it said. He knew this kind of silence. It came before decisions. Nathan unfolded the page. The letter was from Robert Langford, the Chief Executive Officer of Blue Ridge Airways. It acknowledged the incident. It apologized for the conduct of the employees involved. It promised an internal review, expanded training, and a direct conversation with Nathan at his convenience. The words were professional, careful, late. Nathan read it once, then again. Daniel finally turned. "Is it real?" Nathan placed the letter on the desk. "It is real enough to be sent after they felt pain." Daniel's face tightened. "That does not make it meaningless." "No," Nathan said, "but it does make it incomplete." He stood and walked to the window. San Diego stretched below him in bright afternoon light. Glass towers, moving cars, people crossing streets with coffee in one hand and phones in the other. Ordinary lives, private burdens, invisible battles. Nathan thought of Margaret Ellis on that flight, her thin hands on the armrest, her steady voice cutting through the pressure. He thought of Emily Parker looking away when courage would have cost her something. Ryan Brooks hiding behind procedure. Calvin Reed calculating risk. Tyler Prescott believing the world owed him a seat because it always had. And he thought of the people who would never own a software company, the ones who would never sit across from executives, the ones who would be told to move, then spend years telling themselves it was not worth the trouble. That was the part that stayed with him. That was the part that mattered. A week later, Blue Ridge announced new passenger equity training for frontline employees. They revised their escalation policy. They added a review step before any passenger could be asked to surrender a confirmed premium seat for non-safety reasons. The announcement did not mention Nathan by name. It did not need to. Inside the company, people knew. Stephanie Cole called once more, this time without a team behind her. No polished presentation, no careful audience, just her face on the screen, tired and sincere. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "I wanted you to know Emily Parker has submitted a written statement." She admitted she felt pressured to favor a frequent flyer. Ryan Brooks has been removed from premium cabin assignments pending review. Calvin Reed is no longer handling passenger escalation. Nathan listened. "And Tyler Prescott?" Stephanie looked down. "His elite account privileges have been suspended while we review several prior complaints." Nathan nodded slowly. "Good." Stephanie swallowed. "I know that does not fix what happened." "No," Nathan said. "It does not." She accepted that. He respected her more for not arguing. "But it may stop it from happening to someone else," she said. Nathan's expression softened for the first time. "That is where repair begins." The call ended quietly. Months passed. Whitmore Systems did not renew the old agreement as it had been. Blue Ridge was allowed to compete for a new contract, under stricter terms, full pricing, and no informal favors. Pacific Union became Whitmore's largest aviation client. North Star followed soon after. Business moved on. But Nathan did not forget. One evening, he met Daniel and Michael Bennett for dinner near the harbor. The restaurant was calm, with low lights and the soft sound of silverware against plates. Outside, boats rocked gently in the dark water. Michael, who had known Nathan since college, listened to the whole story without interrupting. When Nathan finished, Michael leaned back and shook his head. All that because one man could not sit in his own seat. Nathan looked down at his glass. "No," he said. "All that because too many people thought his comfort mattered more than my dignity." The table went quiet. Daniel lowered his eyes. Michael nodded slowly. Then Nathan smiled faintly. Besides, it was never really about 1A. Michael raised an eyebrow. Then what was it about? Nathan looked toward the window, where the harbor lights trembled on the water. It was about whether I would let them teach me to disappear. No one spoke for a while after that. Because some truths do not need response. They only need room. Nathan did not become louder after that day. He did not become bitter. He did not carry the story like a weapon. He carried it like a reminder. Respect should never depend on someone's title, or their clothes, or their seat number, or whether the person serving them knows they have power. True character is revealed in the moments when people believe there will be no consequence. That is where dignity is either protected or taken. That is where small choices become large ones. That is where a seat on an airplane can become a mirror for an entire company. Nathan had been underestimated. He had been pressured. He had been asked to move, but he stayed. Calm, still, certain. And by staying, he forced everyone else to see what they had tried not to see. If this story reminded you of the importance of standing firm with dignity, take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more stories about justice and human courage, and leave a comment with these 3 words: respect every person.